Hey guys, welcome back. I am so excited for this show because 1989 was kind of a special time of transition for me. It wasn't just transitioning from elementary school to junior high or middle school, but my interests were transitioning from baseball to basketball. And in today's show, we're going to share some stories from the biggest names in basketball during that 1989 season, and I loved learning about and watching those players. One player on today's list was so bored during an NBA basketball game that he decided to play left-handed, and he finished with 47 points and a triple-double. Another player was supposed to become the superstar of his generation and the next franchise player for his team, but instead he tragically died at just the age of 27. A future Hall of Famer accidentally spit on a fan. One player, and I had no idea about this, battled alcoholism early in his career, but came back stronger than ever and even earned his way onto the Dream Team. And one of the cards that I showcase here in my countdown wasn't even that big a name at all, but this card is valuable not for who's on the front of the card, but who's on the back. Now let's set the stage. 1989 was a fascinating year. Batman was the #1 movie in theaters, but the best movie? That one. I love that movie. And of course, this is when the Nintendo was starting to explode. Super Mario 3 was just coming out. This is when teenagers were wearing neon colors, acid-washed jeans, and if you had money, you had some Air Jordans. We had Madonna, Bon Jovi, GNR, and even Paula Abdul dominating the charts. And for the first time, at least in my lifetime, basketball cards were becoming a really big deal. 1989 actually marked a kind of a landmark year because for the first time fans could choose between Fleer and some other kind of basketball. NBA hoops started in 1989. And then the next year we had Skybox in 1990, as well as Upper Deck, which was starting in baseball in 89, but then came over to basketball in 1990 as well. So just like baseball cards, basketball cards were on the cusp of exploding. And for us as kids, it was about collecting. It wasn't about finding value in the cards or the hobby. Even though we had the Beckett and we wanted to see if the values were going up and down, we knew that there wasn't a lot of money in it, but we cared about the players and we wanted to learn more about them. We wanted to get those weird error cards. And so the hobby was a lot of fun in the late 80s. So today we're counting down the top 8 highest selling cards from the 1989-90 Fleer basketball set. This is looking at recent sales on eBay and as documented on price charting. And some of the cards that made this list aren't the ones that you would expect. Now, when people talk about the junk wax era, we typically are talking about baseball cards because that's what was exploding in the 1980s as far as production runs. There were just a ton of baseball cards and they were super fun to collect. And from 1986 till about 1992, that's the junk wax era, and that's where everything was overproduced. But in the mid 1980s, they weren't even producing basketball cards, at least not at a mass scale by the same companies as baseball. Now, there had been basketball cards. In fact, Topps had really dominated the market with basketball cards running from the 1960s all the way up through the 1982-83 season, but then they stepped away for a few years. And there was Star, but nobody really collected Star. You would get those in full sets. There weren't packs that you could open from 83 till 86. 86 is the landmark year because Fleer signed an exclusive deal with the NBA for merchandising and licensing, and they created their Fleer wax packs starting in the 1986 season. Now, while in baseball, 1986 was the start of the junk wax era, in basketball is the opposite. That's the holy grail of all basketball. That 86 season with Michael Jordan's rookie card is super valuable and super rare to get as sealed product. A sealed Fleer basketball box from 1986-1987, the value is right around $100,000. And then even 1987 to 1988, a box of that is worth about $15,000 today is what it's going for. 1988 to 1989 is upwards of $5,000. And so 1989 is really the first year where Fleer made a set that today is attainable, at least for me as a collector. I got my hands on a box. It cost me a whopping $541. And $541 is about $15 a pack. That's 3 or 4 times more than any other box I've ever bought of basketball cards, so these are not cheap cards. Now, the reason this box is so valuable is, again, they weren't producing these as at the same scale they were baseball cards, and so Fleer's a little bit more rare from the 80s. And the common cards, honestly, the common cards in this set aren't worth a lot. In fact, in the whole set, there's only 31 cards, according to Beckett, that are worth $1 or more, and only 11 that are worth $5 or more. However, when you grade cards, that's a different story, and that's the difference between collecting in the 80s and collecting today. If you send a card in for grading and it comes back with a PSA 10, all those dollar cards are worth $50 or more. And of course, a few of them are worth thousands, and that's why we're doing this countdown. All right, so let's get into it. Number 8 on our list is Magic Johnson. And in 1988 and 89, Magic was at the top of his game. He led the Showtime Lakers to a 57-25 record and a trip to the finals where they lost to the Pistons. He was the MVP that season, averaging 22.5 points, 12.8 assists. That's insane. And 7.9 rebounds, almost averaging a triple-double. Perhaps the most impressive stat that season is his assist percentage was 44%, which is one of the highest ever. That means almost half of the points scored by his teammates were off passes from Magic. Now, Magic's one of the all-time greats, triple-double machine, led the Lakers for a decade. But what I didn't know was how significant his rookie season in 1980 was. Lakers made it to the finals that season, and he stepped in for an injured Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as a rookie and put up 42 points, 15 assists, and 7 rebounds, playing center. He helped the Lakers to a title and won the finals MVP. And that's how he became the face of the league for the early 80s. When I started following basketball there in the late 80s, I was a huge Magic fan. He might have been my favorite player during that time, and I was devastated when I learned of his HIV diagnosis in 1991 and that he would be retiring from basketball. I felt betrayed because as a kid, I didn't realize that so many NBA stars or players were unfaithful to their spouses. And this was a wake-up call for me as a kid. It really hurt the perception or the fandom that I had for Magic Johnson.
And his statement here saw the heartbreak of some of the kids that idolize him, and so it's a tragedy.
When he retired at 32 years old, he had been the league MVP again that season. He still played in the 1992 All-Star game because he was voted in by fans. And of course, he was part of the Dream Team there in 1992 as well. After 4 seasons away from basketball, he came back and played for a few more seasons, this time as a power forward instead of as a point guard. And to this day, he's one of my favorite players to watch playing basketball. Now, as disappointed as I was in him as a kid, I've really grown to admire him as an adult, not just for what he's done for AIDS awareness, but for what he's done in urban communities to build up and strengthen the communities he's been a part of. He's been hugely successful as a business owner, putting franchises and different kinds of businesses into more urban settings, places where they didn't have certain businesses. That includes Starbucks Coffee, Burger King's, and a bunch of movie theaters. He's also been a part owner in professional teams, sports teams in almost every professional league. His estimated net worth today is probably somewhere in the 600 to 700 million range, and of course, almost all of that came after he retired from playing basketball. He's made some very positive contributions to this world, and so I'm thrilled to have him at number 8 on this list. His 1989 card is a PSA 10 with an Auto 9, and it recently sold on eBay for $199. Coming in at number 7 is the round mound of rebound himself, Sir Charles. Barkley averaged 28.3 points, 11.9 rebounds, 3.9 assists, and 1.7 steals in 1988. At age 25, this was his 4th season in the league, and he was an All-NBA selection to the first team. Over his career, he averaged 22.1 points, 11.7 rebounds, and 3.9 assists. He was the MVP in 1993, an 11-time All-Star, a 5-time All-NBA first teamer, and inducted to the Hall of Fame Fame in 2006. He, of course, also was part of the Dream Team. What made Barkley great was his ability to rebound, despite being way shorter than the people that he was guarding. Sometimes it was centers, sometimes it was power forwards, but he was only 6'6", so it was super impressive that he was able to pull down as many boards as he did. He's also made a name for himself just for being authentic, being himself, which sometimes is a little bit off-putting. In fact, in 1991, he tried to spit on a heckling fan, but accidentally hit a little girl. A little bit later in a Nike commercial, he says, "I'm not a role model."
Just because I dunk a basketball doesn't mean I should raise your kids.
He's become one of the most popular analysts of all time because of his humor and his authenticity, but also for his unpredictability.
Time out.
Yeah, I know what you're gonna say.
Y'all giving him credit for knowing how to read? Don't give this guy credit.
No, we're not. Go ahead, Chuck. Go.
Okay. TNT, the alienist, premieres. Premieres this Monday at 9.
This is not a word.
This isn't.
This is not a word.
Hey, man.
It's not up on
Y'all quit screwing around.
All right, go ahead.
I'm gonna have people thinking I can't read.
No, there you go.
Hey.
No, you gonna have people thinking you can't read.
TNT, the alienist.
Okay, it's time for more Shaq than a fool. Just stop it, man. Stop.
Good job, Shaq.
I appreciate it.
Go ahead.
And of course, you probably recognize him for all the commercials that he does.
That velvety voice, that's his signature. Like, I'm known as the good-looking guy. Always at arts and craft festivals.
You go to arts and crafts festivals?
I am a sucker for pottery, Sam.
These guys with the really long horns, what are they called? I know this. It's right on the tip of my brain.
Longhorns.
Sure, Sam. Longhorns, right.
Or another reason banking with Capital One is an even easier decision than this.
I'll take Barkley.
Yes!
His 1989 card wasn't his rookie card. It was his 4th season, but he was a very, very popular player at that time. And it remains popular today. His card in a PSA recently sold for $224.99. Number 6 on this list was actually a player who I didn't even recognize his name when I first looked him up. 88 through 89 wasn't a marquee rookie class, but there were some solid rookies in that class. There was Dan Marley, Hershey Hawkins, Kevin Johnson, and especially Mitch Richmond, who I was a huge fan of during that time. Now, there was only one rookie that made the top 8 in this countdown, and it wasn't any of those guys. It was Reggie Lewis. So why is Lewis's card so valuable? He did have a solid rookie season, and the potential for greatness was definitely there. By the early 90s, he was averaging over 22 points a game, and a lot of people thought he would become Boston's next franchise player, kind of taking the reins from Larry Bird. But he was definitely the big what if on this list. In 1993, he was averaging almost 21 points a game and was just voted to his first All-Star team. But during the playoffs, he collapsed because of a rare heart condition. His condition wasn't agreed upon by doctors, so he came back in the next game and scored 27 points. Unfortunately, the problem didn't go away, and 3 months later, during the offseason, he was practicing on a court. He collapsed once again, and this time he did not recover. He passed away at the age of 27, way too soon. So while Lewis wasn't a Hall of Famer, he was an inspiration and a huge what if, and his rookie card is valuable today. One in a PSA 10 recently sold on eBay for $285. Now, if Magic was the most dominant player in the early 1980s, and we have Reggie Lewis, who's about to take reins in the early 90s, at least for the Celtics, the player between those two was the one that was the most dominant player of the mid-80s, and that's Larry Legend. Also known as the Hick from French Lick, Bird was a small-town kid who didn't look like he should be that good at basketball, but he was. He was a clutch shooter that had over 30 game winners over the course of his career. He always wanted the ball in big-time situations, and he had a mouth loving to jaw with other players.
Any way he wanted to. Larry Bird was cold.
Bird didn't talk trash to you,
Oh
did he?
my God, Bird talked trash to everybody.
Now, in 1988 through 89, he only played in 6 players due to heel and foot injuries, but over his career, he averaged 24.3 points, 10.0 rebounds, and 6.3 assists per game. He was a 3-time NBA champion, a 3-time NBA MVP, 2 times final MVP, 12-time All-Star, 9-time All-NBA first team selection, and was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1998. For a game in 1986, which was his third MVP season, he was a little bit bored and decided to play left-handed. He dropped 47 points, 14 rebounds, and 11 assists, marking his 10th triple-double of the season. And when they asked him why he played left-handed, he said, "I just felt like doing it." And he was so cocky. When he walked into the locker room before his third straight three-point contest, he went to the different players in the locker room and said, "Which one of you guys is going to finish second?" He had a reputation for telling the people who were guarding him, his defenders, exactly what he was going to do, and then he did it anyways. He was gritty and cocky and loved to jaw with the other players, but he was also, in a different way, super humble and definitely loyal. During the off season, he'd go home to French Lick, Indiana, and do mundane manual labor like shoveling gravel or fixing his mom's driveway. There are some rumors that a lot of the health problems he had later in his career, especially with his back, came because of that manual labor that he did in the off season. Now, after retiring, he stayed in Indiana, becoming the head coach for the Pacers and the winningest coach of 1998. He took them to the NBA Finals 2 years later and then became the executive of the year in 2012. His 1988 Fleer card in a PSA 10 recently sold on eBay for $300. Now, number 4 on this list was a huge surprise to me. I've heard of John Williams. He's a great composer. He wrote Star Wars and Jurassic Park. And the Indiana Jones movies. Great composer, maybe the best composer of our generation. But number 4 on this list is a different John Williams. Actually, it's 2 different John Williams. On the front of the card was John Williams of the Washington Bullets. But on the back of the cards is John Williams from the Cleveland Cavaliers. So this was an error card. Of course, error cards was one of the things that made collecting in the late 80s so much fun. Of course, we had the famous Billy Ripken F-face card in baseball, and that was 1989 Fleer in baseball. But in 89 Fleer basketball, we had this John Williams wrong player error card. Honestly, I didn't even know this was an error card back then. I might even have it. I'll have to dig through my old cards. And I don't think I'm alone. I don't think many people know about this. That's why it has retained its value and remained pretty rare. The PSA 10 that recently sold on eBay sold for $445. Now for number 3, remember the old rap trio Run DMC, which was kind of the OG of rap? Here we go. Rock around, that's right, on time is tricky. Run DMC inspired the nickname of Golden State's Run TMC, which was the trio of Mullins, Richmond, and Hardaway, the three-headed monster from Golden State.
This Run TMC right here, me, Molly, Mitch. Run TMC. Gonna go back about 20 years out of Golden State, they were here and cheer. Warriors running with the 3-man crew became something like phenomenon. Kim Hardaway, my man in the point, Kill across in the mold, cold rocking the joint, and by his side, going day after day. Richmond will get in his way. Last but not least, he's a jump shot beast. On opponents, Chris Mullen is having a feast. Hard to find a trio better than these 3. Ken, Mitch, and Chris.
Mullen, or Mully, was one of the best pure shooters of his generation. He had a high basketball IQ and an incredible mid-range game. But he flew under the radar in the 80s because he played for Golden State, which was, a smaller market team. He also didn't have a big and flashy personality, so it makes sense that he kind of flew under the radar. But he was part of the dream team, and he was a phenomenal player. In 1988-89, Mullen averaged 26.5 points, 5.9 rebounds, 5.1 assists, and 2.1 steals. He was named to the All-NBA first team, and over his career, he averaged 18.2 points, 4.1 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game. He was a 5-time All-Star, a 4-time All-NBA selection, a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, and was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2011. Now, what I didn't know as a kid was that early in his career, Mullen struggled with alcoholism and checked himself into rehab in 1987. When he came back from rehab, he was stronger, more focused, and an even better player. Contrasting from some players I've already talked about with Bird and Barkley, Mullins was quietly elite. He didn't do any trash talking. He just got the job done. After his playing career, he returned back to New York City to be the head coach at St. John's and did that for a while. Now, I wouldn't expect Chris Mullins to be in the top 3 of 1989 Fleer basketball. It wasn't his rookie season. But just as he flew under the radar, this card flies under the radar, getting to number 3 because it was a basketball sticker, not his base card. Any of the stickers from the 89 set were notoriously hard to get graded in a 9 and 10, and if you got any of them graded in a 9 or 10, it'd be worth hundreds of dollars. But he was one of the few recently sold from the last few months at least, and so he's the one that made it to the top of this list. His sticker card in a PSA 10 recently sold for $510. Now, number 2 at this list is the person that you'd expect at number 1, and that's his airness, Michael Jordan. Jordan, of course, was the face of the NBA in the late 80s till perhaps even today. Kids then wanted to wear Air Jordans. They wanted to drink Gatorade. They wanted to be like Mike. He wasn't just a basketball player. He was a global icon. In 1988 through 89, Jordan averaged 32.5 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists, and almost 3 steals per game. He led the NBA in scoring and was the Defensive Player of the Year the season before. Over his career, Jordan averaged 30.1 points, 6.2 rebounds, 5.3 assists, and he won 6 NBA championships, 5 MVPs, 10 scoring titles, 14 All-Star selections, 6 Finals MVPs, and was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2009. Many consider him the greatest of all time. I know that's a debate that we could get into. We're not going to get into it now, but it's easy to put him up there in that discussion. Part of the reason that he became so great is because he was obsessed with competition. He'd invent slights and insults against himself just to motivate himself before games. Teammates and opponents would talk about how intense he was, even in practices where he'd turn meaningless drills into big-time competitions. One of the most famous stories about this competitive streak that he had was in 1992 when he was part of the Dream Team. He and Magic Johnson got into a scrimmage where they were playing against each other, and it started out like any other scrimmage, but it heated up really fast, and late in that scrimmage, Jordan just took over because he wanted to prove that he was the king of basketball. Now, despite his intensity on the court, there are also a number of great stories about how generous and kind he was off the court. One of the famous stories there was during a Bulls basketball game, there was a fan that made a half-court shot and was owed $1 million by the team, but on a technicality, they got out of the contract. So the insurance company wasn't willing to pay the $1 million, so Michael Jordan pressured the Bulls organization to pay him, which they eventually did due to pressure from Michael and his other teammates. He was kind off the court, but he was ruthless on the court. You know, one of his most famous games was that flu game, and as a Jazz fan, I did not love that he kept my Jazz from winning their first NBA title.
3:30 this morning, Michael Jordan woke up with flu-like symptoms. He had a stomach ache and a headache, and he couldn't go back to sleep. He threw up all night.
During that flu game in 1997, when he was exhausted and miserable and drained, he just casually dropped 38 points so the Bulls could win the game. Now, whether it was the flu or food poisoning, it doesn't really matter. No matter what state Jordan was in, he would get up for every game that he played in. He was consistently great, which is why I hated him. I was a Jazz fan. I hated him then, but I admired what he could do on the court. And like Magic Johnson, off the court, he's been incredibly successful in business. Most of that, of course, is due to his Air Jordan brand and the royalties that he gets from Nike as part of that brand, but he has made an incredible amount of money and continues to be a high earner off the court. Now, unlike almost all other basketball cards during the junk wax era, starting here in 89 and working through the early 90s, most even stars during that time, their cards aren't worth very much, but every single Michael Jordan card has some value. His base card is a big reason why this box is so expensive, because even as just a raw ungraded card, it's going to be worth $20, $30, $40. But if you get it graded in a high grade, it's worth a lot more. Coming in at number 2 in a PSA 10, Michael Jordan's base card recently sold for $2,999.99. Well, if that's number 2, number 1 is definitely going to be a shocker, right? No, it's Michael Jordan's sticker card. And as I explained earlier, the stickers were a lot harder to get graded in a 9 or a 10. And Michael Jordan's recently sold in a 10 for 42, 42, 42. Now, why 42? I don't know. If you know, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. I think sometimes when people bid high on cards, they just do something funny with their bidding. Jordan's always been super collectible, and those stickers are super hard to grade in a high grade. And so you put those two things together, and it's not a surprise that that's what makes number one on this list. So now I'm curious, if you were collecting cards in 1989, what were the cards you most wanted to pull out of a pack? Was it Jordan, Bird, Barkley? For me, it was Stockton to Malone, and then after that, maybe Magic, and then Jordan. I quickly became a Jordan fan thereafter and started collecting him. But at that time, I just wanted my team. And what story most surprised you in today's countdown? I'd love to hear that in the comments. If you enjoy basketball cards, baseball cards, junk wax nostalgia, and the stories behind the hobby, I hope that you'll consider subscribing to this channel and sharing it with others. And I'll see you next time on Chasing Junk.